Hello and welcome to another developer diary for the lovely MEIOU Texas 3.0, and once more, the fourth time, they've hit it out of the park once again, because all of this sounds really, really exciting and I can't wait to get my hands on it. So, today we're going to be talking about warfare. So, war never changes, at least according to the team's countless hours playing Fallout. Hopefully the earlier Fallout games, because the newest ones are kind of shit. Anyway, sadly 3.0 must depart from this honoured tradition because war has changed quite dramatically. And yes, oh, they are not joking here. For today's topic, we'll be showcasing how war has changed from recruitment of armies to their maintenance and much more. Let's get started. Alright, lovely. So starting off with manpower. Manpower has always been something that is quite difficult to work with. You make the reinforcement too fast and it becomes unrealistic and meaningless. Too slow and you have to wait for ages before you can wage another war again. Not to mention how it makes fast-paced expansion practically impossible. And above all, it was quite detached from the actual reality of your provinces. It was somewhat difficult to even understand what it's supposed to represent. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Certainly in the early game, there are very few countries that have any kind of decent amount of manpower recovery. You can find yourself in a situation where you have like 10, say you're Byzantium, Empire of the Romans, sorry, and you win your first war against the Ottomans, and you take just the coastline, you take, just the provinces bordering like Prussia, the Straits, all that, from strait to strait, basically. You generally find yourself earning only, 10 manpower a month. So yeah, I can certainly see where he's coming from there. It was kind of hard. It was much too slow. But yeah, let's see how it's changed. In 3.0, manpower has been completely reworked to address that under the superb framework designed by Vinefin. It starts by tying manpower to something more concrete, like actual population numbers. Oh, you know what's coming. You know what's coming. With 3.0, all classes, except for slaves, track their own separate manpower pool. It represents the number of fighting age men within each class. It can decline if men are raised from the pool, but it also regenerates as time goes on. Provincial manpower is derived from how many men are drawn from their respective manpower pool. If the manpower tax rate is 10%, then 10% of each pool is raised to form the provincial manpower stat. The national total manpower becomes the sum of whatever provincial manpower the nation can access, forming the upper limit to how much manpower a state can have in reserve, so to speak. Actual manpower and its recovery, as such, represents the bureaucracy actually incorporating the people into the system and keeping them tracked, such that they can be raised when the state wills it. So basically, all of your different population types will have their own manpower, and depending on what kind of policy you enact, you could have more of those men in the manpower pool or fewer, and that will impact the economy because the more people you put into the manpower pool, the less of those men are actually working in your provinces. Some might ask then, what would happen when the state actually uses its manpower to raise regiments? The answer is quite simple. When manpower is used, the population is removed from your provinces accordingly. If you raise 1,000 men, then those men have to come from somewhere. Yes! Yes! The population of a province will go down when you recruit men from that province. Yes, that's awesome. That is phenomenal. Actually, it really is. So you have to be very aware of what you're doing, because if you just raise all of the men possible, no one's working the fields, no one's in your factories or your manufactories, and your economy will completely tank because instead of, having a functioning country, you've just become an army with some land. There's no one actually, no one is making the materials necessary to fund that army. So, yeah, it's going to make you think a lot more. The connection between your population and your soldiers, as KJH put it, the eye of the dragon that completes the picture. This cost means that manpower is not a trivial resource, and that losing troops in wars can have a very real impact on your population. Losses in battles are not always deaths, but a decent number are crippled and killed, meaning they will never return to fuel the economy. Waging a very costly war can send your provinces into a decade of economic depression. Reactivity as a result. War has costs, even successful offensive wars. The way I'm seeing this is you kind of want the lowest manpower tax rate possible so that you have a really strong economy, and you only really want to increase that tax rate in the most dire circumstances. Like if it's between I am going to lose this war and it's going to be complete shit, versus, like if that's the case, then yeah, you would kind of want to hurt your economy to, survive. Short-term pain, long-term existence, I guess. But yeah, I like this. This also means that if you have the money, if disbanding always returns men to the manpower pool, then I'm thinking that if you are a very wealthy nation, which you would be if you've got all of your troops, working the fields instead of sitting around being a manpower man, then you might consider being a nation that raises troops only when they're at war and disbanding them afterwards. Because if you're only paying for their, initial cost when raising them, obviously your manpower is going in and out, so that's irrelevant at this point. I feel like that'd probably be the smartest way to play if you have the money for it. If you keep enough of a reserve in hand to be able to do that, that might be a good idea. Like, I don't know, I haven't played with this yet, so maybe I'm totally wrong and that would be a completely terrible idea, but that's the feeling that I'm getting. So here we're looking at Taiwan. As we see here, even China's vast reserves can slowly be depleted. Tianwan, here is still in a massive war as they attempt to unify China under one banner. So far they're winning, but their manpower is edging closer and closer to empty. So we have a look at this now. We can see that the maximum manpower is 81,677, and they're gaining 846 a month. That's actually not too bad. They're certainly not in danger of, running out just yet. Oh, sorry, they've got 31,000 left as well. Overextension is still causing a manpower hit, which does make sense in my opinion, because you are needing these troops to garrison these provinces until you get, your bureaucracy up and running. So yeah, that makes sense. It still makes sense, I mean. Then they've got manpower is recovered faster with international influence and army tradition. War exhaustion makes it go slower. Yeah, all seems fairly decent. Reform military elite. I guess that's the, the government reforms. But yeah, okay, fair enough. Then we've got the Bahmanis here. In India, things are a bit more chaotic. Bahmanis here is in the middle of a losing war despite having manpower and money still. Whereas still, their enemy still has manpower to burn, so attrition will likely not save them. So having a look here, Bahmanis has, 25,000 troops with what looks like a terrible general, who knows? And then there's 17,000 troops. I guess that's Vijayanagar? I'm not sure. Honestly, I could probably win that. If there's some decent defensive terrain. No, it's not Vijayanagar's flag. Vijayanagar has the yellow one. You take that 25k, you attack the 17,000, push them back. Depending on what's beneath that negative 28%, could be really good, could be really bad. But there's a lot of really small stacks that you can clean up very, very quickly. I reckon I could probably win that war. Also, it looks like, why does Vijayanagar have naval supremacy there when Bahmanis has 29 plus 14 plus 1 ships there? They have more ships, maybe they're just not the right ships. Also, it looks like they're running low on naval supplies. Oh yes, naval supplies, not sailors. We'll get to that. And here in Jalarids, Jalarids have just finished several major wars and as a result lack the manpower to repel their most recent enemy. Oh yeah, they're very much tapped. They have the money though. I wonder if they've changed mercenaries. Ooh, I don't think this dev diary mentions that. Be interesting to see what they do about that. Alright, maintenance. Historically, armies consumed a lot of resources. The logistical problems of keeping your army fed and equipped decided the outcome of wars more often than battles. And the resources consumed by vast wars both stimulated and destroyed the economy at various times in history. To represent that, armies and navies now consume various trade goods produced by the economy. The units that you recruit and maintain have a base rate of demand for each trade good. Their demand is offloaded to the trade node where your trade capital is located at, and the price for those goods in that trade node determines the cost of maintenance and recruitment for your armies. Oh, so it impacts recruitment as well. Interesting, okay. This opens up interesting interactions between the state and the underlying economy. You can build a fleet which increases naval material demand and therefore leads to increase in size for your naval related industries. Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't really get that before the first time I read this. If you build your fleet, you're stimulating the growth of the production of the supplies, the trade goods needed for that fleet. So you're stimulating, say, if you've got a province that creates wool, obviously for the rigging, or maybe it's all put into naval materials. Provinces that produce those naval materials would be economically stimulated because their products are being bought. Oh, that is very interesting. Ooh. You can build an army which leads to import of military product like war horses from the nomadic steppes. Alright, so if you build a lot of horses, then you're importing horses from other countries. I like that. It can be seen as a flow of wealth that moves from the state to the economy rather than being a simple loss of wealth that disappears into the void. Simply raising an army now has a chain of effects throughout the game, creating an organic military-industrial complex based on supply and demand. Sending your troops to battle has a real consequence, with every battle risking the lives of thousands of fighting-age men, the same men who are the keystones of your economy. Victory and defeat will have a unique consequence, something to consider as you send your men to far-off lands in M&T 3.0. Yeah, it seems like everything is very interconnected. Like, you need your men to create the goods that you need to, raise troops. Those troops are also the people that make those goods. So the more troops you make, the fewer goods you make, and the fewer goods they make, the fewer troops you can raise. It all kind of goes around in circles. I like it. Alright, so sailors are the neglected stepchild of EU4. Even in vanilla they don't really work, and almost every mod ignores them. I would say that I can't think of a mod that changes it. I guess they ignore it just by leaving it. But I don't know of many or any mods that change sailors to not be a thing. Yeah, I mean, I think that's really kind of it's not worded very well. Because, yeah, you're technically right, they ignore them, but they ignore them by leaving it alone. So, yeah, I guess you're technically right, and that's the best kind of right. Sailors are a silly system, a bright thought but poorly implemented. Rare is the person who believes that sailors were a good idea for EU4. I mean, before sailors were a thing, if you looked in defines.lua, there was the option of having boats cost manpower to build, and I feel like that's probably a better idea. I don't think you could have them cost manpower upkeep though. Like when you're repairing them in dock, it wouldn't take manpower, it's just a one-time cost kind of thing. But that was a long time ago now. This means sailors no longer need to exist, yet at the same time ships should be limited in ways more complex than force limit, and simulating the difficulty of maintaining a strong navy would bring a lot to the mod. Those who have read our previous dev diaries would recall that provinces now produce trade goods through slots that contain industries. One of those industries produces a trade good called naval product. This naval product would replace sailors as such, and the resource represented by them is now a measure of your reserve of naval supplies and shipbuilding resources. It will be consumed by ships at sea and required to produce ships in much the same way. The total pool of sails now represents a strategic reserve maintained by your country. It also means that no major naval power can function without the ports and production to maintain its ships. Without it, you can't field your navy for naval operations and cannot replace your losses. You need to build cities, build up infrastructure, and invest in industries if you want to have large squadron of light ships patrolling your shores. The hulking behemoths that are heavy ships will be even more costly, but thankfully not so active. If you lack the industries, then the naval race will be lost. Alright, it's sort of... I mean... I'm sure it's more than just a rename of sailors, but at the same time, it kind of is. It's just renaming sailors to naval materials. But with naval, it's like if sailors were trade goods now as well. So I guess, yeah, they've changed it in that sailors are now a trade good and it's just been renamed. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Alright, moving on. As you can see here, AI England is currently in the middle of a massive naval deployment in its war with AI France. It's losing the war, and possibly one of the reasons is that it's out of naval materials, meaning that soon the blockades and deployments will start to weaken. But they have deployed their armies fully across the channel safely, so perhaps the war may turn in their favor. Yeah, I mean, they are out of naval materials there, and they're losing like 3 times the amount that they're making. But at the same time, France doesn't really have a navy in that image, so I think it's still fine. It's very unlikely to knock a country out of a war via just a blockade anyway. So, yeah, fair enough. 100 spy network on France in MEIOU taxes. That's rare. That's very rare. Alright, looting. Looting is not a new feature in M&T, and the implementation has not changed drastically for 3.0. But there certainly are changes. The first is where loot can be taken from. As some of you very attentive fellows may have noticed in our prior screenshots, a lot of things now have individual assets, and that means you can take them. Industries and classes both have a wealth stat, and equally both can be looted. There are a range of looting policies, as there were before. It's currently being considered whether these looting policies should have any immediate effects on the war, but what they will do, always, is change how much looting occurs. The majority of loot is, as before, taken by your soldiers and reappears in your class wealth pools, but some of it is funneled directly into the state coffers, and unlike in 2.5, it arrives instantly. Okay, that's good. That means your armies aren't going to get slowed down by fucking loot. I remember quite a few times that I've gone into a battle and marching on, and then my armies elsewhere have finally sieged this really valuable province, and suddenly I get a pop-up. It's like, oh, by the way, you've now got less morale because you've got more loot on you. I was like, well, this army wasn't involved in that looting, but now it's going to take a morale hit, and oh, it's already moving into fight, and oh no, he's lost because he didn't have that morale. So yeah, having it go immediately to the cash pool, I like it. It's good. It's very good. Where were we? There. This means loot from a war can be used directly to pay for the war, a must for many raiding groups. And speaking of tribal raiders that like to burn the world down, more looting also increases the amount of burning which occurs. This is wealth that is destroyed when a province is looted. This means that violent looting policies, while they gain you more wealth, also damage the province much more. Twice the loot means 20% more burning. A potent tool to damage your enemies and profit yourself, but one that is risky to use on land you might intend to take, or on the land of farmers that feed your industrial war machine. Just an idle thought. Yeah, when you're looting, if you're looting someone that's close to you, it can cause a famine that will spread to your own provinces, and it's really devastating. So if you're fighting someone close by, generally it's a good idea to have a light looting policy. Alright, fortifications. The basic nature of fortifications has not changed drastically for version 3, but it has changed in a few meaningful ways. The first fairly important change is that local fortifications, those are the blue ones, are now their own entire building tree called military infrastructure. It does serve the same purpose as it once did, of providing you with weak forts which can protect your provinces, but require no national upkeep. But it does a bit more than that now. It increases local supplies, oh yes, I like that, and hinders your enemy's movements. Ooh, very interesting. It may do something else, but that's outside the scope of war, so to speak, and that must be discussed at a later time. You tease. The second change, equally important, is that forts from military infrastructure stack with those from state forts. No longer does one replace the other. As such, state forts are no longer individually quite so potent fortifications, but instead are meant to act as the centerpiece of a wider set of provincial defenses. State forts would be your standard movement blocking forts. Fair enough. Sorry, I just need to quickly take a drink. Sorry about that. Right. State forts do, however, still block movement, a vital and unique role. Nations can build military infrastructure and state forts both freely. Okay, so now you can build your little blue forts as their technology and resources permit. This means that you can choose to fortify what you think is most important. Of course, local powers may also decide maybe that they want more defenses as well, but can only build infrastructure, not state forts. Gotcha. We can see here the new building interface, which I'm assuming they're going to expand upon in future dev diaries. I do know a little bit about this, but I don't think I'm allowed to say just yet. Suffice to say, the numbers 10, 100, 1,000 is your, what's the word? Investment into these buildings. But yeah, I'm sure they'll go over in a future dev diary, and yeah, look forward to that one. And up here we've got what? Just showing the fort level, military infrastructure, and the capital city, and the castle. Fair enough. UI still needs a bit of work, of course, but I'm sure that will come in time. A heavily defended province will, as always, be a significant problem for enemy armies, something which is even more important given the nature of looting and the vulnerability of a complex economy. Also, the men who die on the walls of your forts will never work the fields of your enemy again. Defensive warfare can do harm of its own sort. Very true. Like, if they're, again, if the men that you raise will weaken your economy because they're not working the fields anymore. So if they die, trying to siege a fort and taking a shit ton of attrition, then that's, hurting their economy and hurting their nation. I like it. The improvements to these systems brings war home in ways that had not been possible prior to version 3. Each human life has a value, and while that value may only be economic in the simulation, that's still a massive step forward. War is a destructive thing, best waged with care. The wrong embargo might shut down a trade link and suddenly starving your nation of vital resources, or limiting your exports. Careful strikes at key enemy provinces might damage their ports and naval industry for decades. Equally, you face the same threat that your enemy may do lasting damage to you, even if you win the war. And at the last, perhaps, in taking the provinces you covet, you may destroy much of what you once valued in them. That was always true. Being able to damage provinces on it by accident was a pain in the ass, really. Consequences must be weighed carefully, for war is a deadly beast, one as apt to savage you as your enemy. And then we just got some screenshots showing off various things from Ethiopia's perspective. Doesn't really seem like there's much in these to see. But either way, war. First one hopes to win, then one expects the enemy to lose, then one is satisfied that he too is suffering. In the end, one is surprised that everyone has lost. Alright, yeah, so, thoughts, conclusions, and all that. Fuck yes, basically. Long story short, yes, I like it. Main thing that I'm really happy to see is this manpower. Basically, you raise troops from X province loses 1,000 men because those 1,000 men are now troops. You just spam those 10 troops, those dudes move back to the fields. I like it. It works. It's nice. logical, makes sense. I like it. It's good. Yeah, so I'm going to put it cut in there. I hope you've enjoyed this little run through of the 4th Dev Diary from MEIOU Texas 3.0. And the thumbnail is still very much accurate. MEIOU Texas 3.0 looks fucking amazing, and I'm so looking forward to getting my hands on it. Thank you all very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to click the like button. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now.